It's almost everybody.
Okay, Aisha, what do you think? Should we start? Or?
Yes.
Okay, guys. So, as you know, Karen retired as of December 31st. So, um, we don't really have a set agenda for today. What I was thinking of doing was to go around and ask everyone if you have any information, additional information you would like to share with the commission. And then also ask you if you have any individual recommendations you would like to submit to the commission or to Asia within the next month or so. Your own vision as to where we're going with this, whether we're going with universal waste approach or with other approaches, whatever. So does that sound okay to you? Does that sound reasonable? Or?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I'll start with somewhere. Let's see. Lyle, would you like to start? Do you have any?
Sure, a few things actually. One is, we've been talking about the issues for the solar panels as a whole. Dunbar and I had presented some of the numbers of the tonnage of waste year by year, all the way up to the year 2050. How many cubic yards? How many solar panels? So different ways of looking at the numbers, and that was overall. But I've been looking into the literature on the potential environmental effects, and a lot of this has concentrated on the cadmium telluride and the copper indium diselenide because they have toxic metals in them in substantial amounts. And we had a former conversation about we don't have much, if any, and I think none of the copper indium diselenide, to my knowledge. I don't know that there's any of that in the state, but we do have substantial amounts of cadmium telluride, which is the first solar modules. And those have been of particular concern, especially because of the cadmium. I had quantified those before, and as a percentage, it's a small number. It's about 0.25% of all of the solar in the state, and none of it has been done in the last well, actually, I'm going to contradict myself. There were a couple of small ones in the past 5 years, but other than that, the bulk of them are more than 10 or 12 years old. So I think we can expect that not much more will come in the future of the cadmium telluride. So it's a finite amount to deal with, even though this is a matter of particular concern. The fortunate thing is the great majority of that, by far most of it, was installed with PSE&G. And so I expect that PSE&G will do that very much by the book, and we can expect that PSE&G will do it, with an appropriate standard of care and precision, which is important here. And then just two other entities are responsible for almost all the rest. And that's a company called Gem Energy and a company called Mortensen Construction. And so just three entities is nearly all of the First Solar modules in the state. I reached out to First Solar to see if they'd be willing to participate in conversations of how to handle the First Solar modules that are here. Uniquely among solar companies, they have a very robust recycling program in response to the concerns about the cadmium and other metals. So I expect that it would be coordination between First Solar and the Commission and the three entities that own almost all of the panels in the state to formulate a plan for end of life and also what to do with any broken modules that happen in the interim. So I haven't connected with the right people there yet, but yeah, Chris is here from PSE&G. I don't want to get in the middle of it if there's already conversations going on, so let me know if that's the case. But I feel good about the ability to handle that particular concern in an optimal way. Secondly, I've been looking into the studies and the research on the potential for leaching of what is, probably the 99.5% of the modules which are crystalline silicon. And probably the biggest study was a review of about 85 other studies that was conducted by the Indian government, and the conclusion there, really one thing that stood out was that there isn't very much data, nothing that they could rely on in terms of actual measurement of leachate in landfills with solar panels. So there's a little bit of an unknown there. Finally, in terms of recommendations, I'm still struggling and talking with other industry folks about several issues, but one is something that we had discussed before, which was what is the optimal way to make sure that any metals that are in the solar panels do not get out into the environment, just to put it one way. Just some rough calculations about what happens if you crush the solar panels. At the very, very minimum, just rough calculations indicate that you increase the surface that are exposed and vulnerable to leaching by a factor of 300, and if you actually mechanically crush them, possibly much more than that. So it may be an increase of up to 3 orders of magnitude in the potential for leaching once you crush them, which is why I was discussing last time about trying to find ways to prevent breakage of the solar panels, and if there are true recycling opportunities available, then go that route. But if not, I think it's worth exploring an effort to keep the modules unbroken to the greatest extent possible. We're still exploring it, still talking with industry people about it, but I likely will come up with some language and a recommendation along those lines, because solar panels are nearly perfectly encapsulated. So if we can preserve that extremely robust encapsulation, I think overall it minimizes the risk. And then finally, there's a lot of talk in the industry about the cost, the potential cost of disposal, because there's a lot of solar capacity in the ground currently that were done under certain assumptions, and if those assumptions change in a way that essentially cause all of the investors to lose money, that's going to be kind of a inflammatory issue. And I don't have any specific recommendations there, but we're talking about several possible approaches.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd. So, sorry, go ahead. Who's talking? Okay.
I don't think any.
All right. Lyle, so you will have some recommendations for us?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. And how much time do you need for that, you think?
Um, I think uh, I think
Submit.
we're probably going to wrap this up in 3 weeks or so.
Okay. Okay. So you could send that to Asia. We could thank you.
Yeah.
Your recommendations. All right. Now just going over what you said. So you're saying that only about a quarter of percent of solar panels in New Jersey are cadmium telluride. Is that what you said? Only about
That's
0.25.
correct. To be exact, it's 91,404 modules.
And you're
Okay.
going to provide us with that information that you use to base that off of?
Yeah, I had sent it out previously. I can send it around again just so it's on the top of everybody's pile. It's a spreadsheet that details, every project that has those modules in them in the project and how many solar panels, how many megawatts, um, where they are and all of that.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're not about to write a report saying because Lau said.
Yeah, no.
Well, Lau said, and
Right.
Lau thinks, and Lau believes, and Lau is confident that
Yeah.
we need to have the facts to back that up.
Yeah.
So
Well,
those are from the BPU. They have public data on every solar installation in the state. So
Yeah.
That was one of
so
Karen's
so it's solid.
biggest concerns was verifying the low CAD-TEL models using. That was something that Karen was very big on in verifying that that statement is true and accurate, and I'm here to advocate for that.
Yeah.
Make sure you get stuff.
You got it. Yeah, I'll resend it today.
Thank you.
right. Okay, but you said you've been in touch with First Solar.
I haven't yet. I reached out to them. I haven't gotten a reply.
Okay.
And I do want to hear from Chris whether I'm duplicating effort in reaching out to them. But I think would be a good idea to have a general conversation with the three primary owners, PSE&G being the biggest, and for solar, to have a program where they know they've got this obligation in New Jersey, and what's their plan to handle it. But
Okay.
I'm happy to let someone else take control of that conversation.
Okay. The last thing was you mentioned about leaching of metals by crushing solar panels. I
Yeah.
don't know if anybody remembers. I don't know. Is Jim here? Jim Entwistle?
Yes, Jim is here. Can you
Okay.
hear us, Jim?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I just want to add something to that. I'm sorry to jump in. Um, Also looked into not only the potential for leaching if the modules were to be crushed, also if they're crushed and then there's thermal treatment, to essentially burn off the plastic so that the silicon and glass would be recycled in some way. And I know there isn't really a recycling technology to separate out metals and that sort of thing. But if there were any thermal treatment, there's a further concern, I believe, that thermal treatment at a temperature that would burn off the plastic that encapsulates the whole thing, I think would also volatilize the aluminum wiring that's in there. And the data I'm seeing is that next to glass, the second most abundant element is aluminum. And I've observed um, uh, what happens to solar panels when they burn, because there have been a couple of fires in New Jersey on which I've been a consultant or part of the investigative team. And what I've seen is the aluminum disappears. It literally disappears. Even the heavy duty stuff like the frame, and the frame is going to be removed as the first step, I would hope. And I hope the commission is clear on that. That one thing that I hope we can all agree on is remove the frames before whatever else we do with the glass and the solar cells. But even and those are heavy, thick extrusions. even those just completely disappears, essentially presumably oxidized and burned off. Um, but the very, very thin wires inside the solar cells, if you burn off the plastic, I'm very confident that that aluminum is going to end up in the air. And so I'm feeling very cautious and concerned about any thermal treatment that would happen down the road, and something that I think would be recommended against. So sorry for the interruption, but I just wanted to add that.
Well, and let me add something related to that, and I think this was part of the conversation during our last meeting. But we were talking about one of the companies that was offering reprocessing was a glass company. Essentially, then that does include, just like Lyle's talking about, it's a high temperature treatment to melt the glass again and aim it towards some kind of low quality um, product. And the one product, well, okay, so we don't know anything necessarily about what they would experience in terms of out the stack, uh, you know, evaporated things, uh, burned things as part of that. But it also was a point that if the one of the main applications for these low quality glass products was road striping, which essentially was distributing all of the glass out into the environment where it would be. Now they're probably operating within some rules for what level of contamination they might have, but so dilution is basically what's happening there, and not prevention. And so I'm wary about the glass company as a safe angle. I'm not sure. I mean, if you were making glass that was in, I don't know, going into the landfill some other way, I guess it's not that different than putting the module in the landfill directly. So
Yeah. Well, except that in that case, if it's an additive to the paint for striping the road, the more finely divided it is, the more opportunity for leaching there is, and
absolutely.
it can be many orders of magnitude higher if it's very, very finely divided. When I said 300x, I was talking about a particle size that it's ground down to of maybe 2/10 of an inch, but in paint it's going to be orders of magnitude worse than that.
So another comment about the fire hazard kinds of inferno, the ones that you had, I've never seen those, but you have described it well, Lyle. I'm sure the kinds of fire that you would have in a building gets really hot. And so in a controlled process, you might be able to uh, do better than that, and the aluminum might,
Mm.
or other wires might not disappear. But
Mm.
um, but
Yeah,
but
that's
it would easily melt that, and
that's a good point, Dunbar, because the couple that I'm talking about when I was actually on the roof were ones that where there was no fire inside the building. It was just under the solar panels, and they were burning essentially in free air, so semi-enclosed. So there was some high temperatures there, but you know, I have no real scientific basis for saying this, but I would imagine that it would be similar to the temperature that would be required to burn off the plastic if you were readying it for being recycled glass, because it was just free and open air, and that's all that was basically happening is the plastic was burning off. The exact same process, and I saw it with my own eyes that the aluminum was just gone for the most part.
so it's interesting to think about the thermal aspect, because I don't know if she's here today. Stephanie had found this company in Japan that was offering a device that would essentially scrape off
hot
I guess
plate.
it would be warming it up enough so that you would be melting the EVA, and then you could scrape it off to some degree. And now I don't know, Lyle, you probably have a number for what a typical EVA encapsulation temperature might be, but it wouldn't have to be too much more than that to get to slice things off. Still have to
Yeah,
figure out what to do with it. But,
I think she described it as a hot knife that would scrape it off,
right.
right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it would certainly be better than trying to drive it off thermally. Yeah.
Yeah.
When you guys do give your papers or your recommendations in written format, take your track changes off. Don't send it with track changes on.
Okay.
Because when we get it, we gonna edit it and apply our own track changes on it. It's going document gonna get crazy. It's gonna be hard to manage that.
So Chris, did you have thoughts about the CADTEL related things we were just talking about? I don't know if.
Uh, Absolutely. Our program now, I think I discussed this before. Right now, we currently, based on our knowledge and manufacturer information, majority of our panels, all of our panels at this point, are going out as hazardous waste. And they're being landfilled at a hazardous waste landfill in Michigan. So we are taking the utmost precautions right now. And I think in some cases, we agree that the material is taking up space in a hazardous waste landfill and it's relatively inert in the state it's going in. There's probably other opportunity to do something different with that panel, right? Where it's either becomes another usable product or a reuse. So that is the reason we wanted to participate with the commission and promote trying to find alternatives for having these end up in first a hazardous waste landfill, or worse, in a municipal landfill where they really don't belong. So yeah, so our program in place is currently providing the most environmental protection possible. We were just trying to see what alternatives could be available. Now, one of the comments I have, and I understand the recycling process, and there are concerns on the end products, but there are a lot of requirements for testing that end product because it's not a virgin material. It requires some chemical testing on the outbound side to determine the concentrations for reuse, right? So there are different federal and state protocols in place for that material coming as the end product. Most of the facilities using thermal treatment obviously have air pollution controls. They're under major facilities, Title V facilities under the EPA. So that there are permits and protections out there for those types of facilities. And I keep going back to the goal of the commission is trying to figure out how to recycle solar panels. What can we do from a product standpoint to get them out of landfills from taking up space? So I just want to, mention that again. And one quick thing I did see, and I was doing some research for some other reasons, and EPA now lists solar panels and photovoltaic systems on their universal waste page for both California and Hawaii. So those two states have successfully petitioned EPA and have the material listed as universal waste, which should give it come up with some more opportunity for those states to recycle the panels. I think we just need to understand there is already an industry out there doing recycling of these panels, and how they do it may differ slightly. The end products produced probably differ slightly, and those reuse of those products differ a little bit slightly. But this is already happening, and I don't think what's going to happen in New Jersey is going to be all that different, because I think a lot of what's going to happen is our out-of-state vendors are going to look at New Jersey as an opportunity and come into our state to do the same. So, this is going to happen nationwide, and I think we're just in the beginning of it, being that we do have a lot of time left for a number of the larger arrays to come out of service.
I agree with Chris. I'm firmly against any type of storage.
Yeah, storage scares me. I mean, we've been through that.
It's a slippery slope.
Okay, so Chris, will you have any recommendations you could share with us in a month or so, in about a month or so? Chris, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me? It just dropped off for a second.
Yeah. Okay, do you have any recommendations you could share with us in the next month or so?
Again. Are you there? I apologize. Connection's a little unstable, but yes, I will have recommendations for the group.
Okay.
Chris, this is Lyle. Just a couple of quick questions, if you don't mind. One is, do you know if PSE&G has been talking to First Solar about their recycling program? And secondly, if you want to get back to me later and just let me know if you guys are okay with me reaching out to them to discuss the subject.
Vendors under the MSAs we have now that deal with our waste management to determine some other options from where the rules stand today versus where they may end up on a universal waste. So yeah, I don't have a problem with you reaching out to First Solar, but keep in mind, one of the problems we face is a regulatory hurdle, right? The regulatory hurdle is right now, because of the lack of data, right, from a conservative approach under RCRA, a lot of these panels have to be considered a hazardous waste when they come out of service. So a lot of the facilities today that are out of state do not have the ability to receive hazardous waste. So we are kind of hamstrung. We cannot ship, right, to an out-of-state facility hazardous waste that does not have the ability to accept it. So that's where the ability to reclassify this material as universal waste will open up the doors to be able to do different things to ship it to either other states that have a universal waste designation or bring industry into New Jersey that will be able to manage this material much more easily than they can today.
Do those regulations apply to material that's being recycled?
They do. It's a determination. There's certain materials that have exception to the rule, but from a solid waste standpoint, the generator has the responsibility to determine.
Yeah, I think we're losing Chris.
Yeah. All right.
This is David. I circulated some materials from a professor at the University of Arizona, I think, who was trying to look at the, I guess a grinding system or a classification system for solar panels and applying the TCLP test. I guess it was a characterization methodology. Has anyone had a chance to look at those? Because it seemed like that if you properly, I guess, characterized the panels themselves, because very few people can grind them up. I've been trying to find someone who could grind a panel for me to do a TCLP test, and I can't find them, honestly. They want me to grind them, when you go to the lab. So I just wonder if anyone had a chance to look at that study from the University of Arizona and see if that helped you maybe justify or better classify these as a universal waste. Because it suggests that if they're characterized properly, they won't fail TCLP. That was my take on it. I guess if you get, I'm sorry, let me say that if you get a representative sample, done, a proper representative sample. Okay.
So was that a published report or was that a news coverage?
I circulated it to this group some time ago. I can recirculate it, but I think it was a published study.
I had seen an announcement by that professor, and I think they had received SBIR startup funding for what they're doing, but I couldn't figure out what they're doing.
Well, what I saw, and I misspoke initially, but it was an attempt to develop a procedure for, I guess, obtaining a representative sample for purposes of the TCLP test. And again, my experience has been, it'd be interesting to see what Chris says, but my experience has been that the labs want you to grind the panel for them and send them a representative sample, which, I cannot do that. I haven't figured out a way to do that. But I can send it again to this group.
That'd be great. I'd look at that closer.
Guys, we got Chris back, but he had to come on the phone because his connection was really bad. Can you hear us, Chris?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear Chris through my phone? Okay, let me turn the volume up some.
Yeah, he's pretty faint.
Okay, how about now, Chris?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
No, that's all right. Yeah. So the problem obviously is getting correct sample preparation for the TCLP analyses, and we've experienced the same thing. We've worked with a couple labs, and we did do some destructive testing. Did it specifically meet EPA methodology? I wouldn't give it 100% compliance, but the data we were receiving, in most cases, we had lead come up well above the TCLP limit for hazardous. So that was the primary constituent that we found on the panels. And from a conservative approach and working and talking through manufacturers without there being any manufacturer information and the data we had, as a precaution, we managed it as hazardous waste to make it compliant. But it is a good point. It is a problem in the industry, and I don't think the manufacturers want to provide so much data relative to those findings either, and there's obvious reasons behind it.
Okay. Joe, do you have anything to share with us today, or?
I've been doing a lot of thinking, but I don't have anything to share yet.
Okay, that's fine. Will you be able to submit any recommendations to us?
I will, yes. I'm focusing mainly on the landfill ban and the legislation, the legislative options for end of life as well as intermediate panels when they become detached from their initial use. Decommissioned, I guess is the word.
Yes, because if Laos information says that, we got probably about 10 years before those really bad ones, those first solar ones, are probably out of commission. So maybe we could suggest some sort of a mid-range or long-term goal for those. I don't know.
Okay. All right, thanks, Joe. Who do we have next? Jim Entwistle?
Yes, I'm on the call.
Okay. Do you have any information you would like to share with the commission?
Yes, and I have no problem making recommendations that'll add to what I've already submitted, but there's a lot of, I think it's important as an electronic recycler that when we work with downstream partners, that we do the due diligence based upon our certification to make sure that the material that they are handling is being handled properly in its end of life, as best as we can, of course, based upon our certification. I think it's important that we don't get into analysis paralysis here, worrying about all this, not so much the TCLP tests and things, as much as working with downstream partners that have the level of experience that are used to handling this material. It's very easy to sit here and say, well, we should stockpile, we shouldn't stockpile. I'm going to recommend that we never stockpile these products, never stockpile any products. We move it through the cycle as quickly as possible, because that's the way it should be handled. Historically, in the electronics world, stockpiling has been an absolute disaster. I think everybody probably on these calls has read things about it. I know there's manufacturers on this call that, we've all run into issues with that. I haven't, but other people have. It's downstream due diligence, making sure that your downstream partner is handling it right. And I guess the question for me is, how much is the commission going to be involved, or the state going to be involved in facilitating this program? Because there's a big elephant in the room here, guys, and it's the cost. Who is going to be paying for the recycling of these modules? And what kind of program are you going to set up for the future payment of these modules? The recycling of them. It's a very, it's never going to be positive. You can sit here and say, oh, you can take off the aluminum frame, but that's not going to give you enough return to handle, just to collect them and get them ready for shipping to a downstream. Taking aluminum off, you have to leave some meat on the bone for the person doing the recycling as well, to keep your costs down. So there's a lot of factors. I'll put some recommendations together. It's no problem.
Okay, that would be great. Okay, Dan, you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that real quick. I mean, in addition to, all of us having seen the issues with, CRT stockpiling and that type of thing, I do think, something Jim just hit on is a real good point, that with, in terms of realistically, what can be done. I know, I work in electronic waste, and one of the things we do run up against is, in terms of vetting downstreams, as important as that is, there's not a whole lot we can, DEP can do beyond the borders of New Jersey. So, I mean, thinking about it, it's like there are a number of, downstream recyclers where the electronic waste gets sent outside of the state, but in terms of what the state's ability would be to track that is, somewhat constrained. So, it is something important to keep in mind, that it's like, if we're talking about any sort of state level policy, that it's not real feasible to send inspectors out, anywhere beyond state borders necessarily. So I think that is, in terms of keeping that in mind and the importance of working with downstream vendors, while at the same time, I'm also 100% recognizing that it's not like we can mandate a solar panel recycling program spring from the ground completely within the state in the next 5 or 10 years. I know that that's also unrealistic. So I think, keeping both of those in mind is important. Even while we do talk about, and acknowledge the importance of vetting downstreams.
Well, and I think it's important to understand as well that, these national certifications that we all have, like I'm, R3s or, certified, they're all actively speaking about adding solar panels to the certification. That will then encompass, more due diligence on our end if we're going to be handling these panels in the future. So that kind of gives you the peace of mind that, when you hand over, if Chris and PSEG, if we get this as a universal waste, which we should, if we get that classification, then someone like a Chris or whomever can turn their panels over, knowing that, having the peace of mind that the downstream due diligence has been done based on national level certifications, and it's totally auditable. our books are always open to anybody that wants to review the books in our downstreams. That's the beauty of the certifications, so it's important to have those, qualifications in place in order to make sure that things are being handled properly. It's easy to sit here and worry about all these different little nuances, but recycling's been happening for a long time, and there's a lot of great people out there doing it. Sometimes you just got to let the people, do what they're good at.
I just want to say something about the whole thing with the cost. Like, every meeting, we always talk about how expensive it is for it to be recycled and to perform all these different processes and make it profitable. But honestly, price and the cost of it, it should be irrelevant. I mean, we do need to consider it, and we do need to take that and factor that into whatever we decide. But all these years, these guys, the problem is created by the manufacturers and by the people who created these and made no circular way to bring it back. Like, so we can't allow ourselves to be bogged down with making it profitable for them. I mean, we can't bog ourselves down with that, but we do need to consider it. But it's been a long time. It just haven't been regulated. Guys have been making their money hand over fist. We can't be bogged down by like making it so they can make a little money off of it. We got to think about the environmental responsibility that have to take precedence over the cost.
Well, Ashia, this is Lyle. I have to make a reply to that because, first of all, the burden that you're talking
about. We're paying for all the recycling.
The installer and the electronics recycler are both speaking at the same time.
It's just too difficult. There's so many different manufacturers, these orphan manufacturers that are gone, that are out of business, that you can't go back to and say, hey, guys, you got to pay. It's very, very tricky, and we've gone through this with electronics. At least there's major manufacturers of electronics that have been around, but they still have to put the bill for what they call orphan equipment. So there's a challenge. I mean, you got to get started with something. PSE&G is paying for their own recycling right now. The question is moving forward. That's why I put forth an advanced recovery fee. And take it off the manufacturers. There's just too many different manufacturers to be trying to chase after to get paid.
The cost is going to be sat with someone. Someone's going to be saddled with that cost.
Well, and this is Lyle. Look, it's very, very, very hard to hear, Ashia, that if it's the manufacturer or the system owner, and the manufacturers, I agree that it's going to be difficult to impossible to go back to them, ex post facto and say now you're responsible for this when you can't even find them. Most of them are in China, and I have to object to the characterization of the system owners as making money hand over fist. Look, this is something that the government of New Jersey enticed investors into this state to do something for the public good, which is fight global climate change, et cetera. And the average rate of return on these projects is 6 to 7%. It's an incredibly, incredibly thin. This is not people making money hand over fist, Asya. And if you go at the end of life and then say, well, hey, guess what? You made a 6 or 7% rate of return, and now we're going to impose a cost that's 6 or 7% of the cost of the project. So you just invested your money at a loss. With even right now, $13-14 billion of investment, that's a firestorm. And by the time we get to 10 years from now, it's going to be more than double that. So, I would not dismiss this issue of cost and cavalierly say these investors are going to take it on. It's going to be a giant problem. The others who mentioned that are absolutely right.
So Lyle and Jim, would you guys have any recommendations on this? And I mean, will you be discussing the costs Any suggestions in your recommendations? How to cover the cost of recycling solar
Storage,
panels?
storage, right? Take all of those solar panels from Somerset County, Ocean County, come bring it down here to Mercer, Middlesex, and Burlington, right?
Well,
How much
you know,
the dress to bring the panels to and drop them off in her garage?
I hope that's not the case, because then we have environmental justice issues that we have to reconcile with.
That's true.
yeah. But I mean, if, as others have recommended, this becomes universal waste, um, that means that it can be disposed of um, or recycled, right? And the disposal, if it's universal waste, would not be equivalent to hazardous waste disposal. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well,
So,
there's still strict requirements. It just gives you the
yeah.
ability to manage and store, and it makes life a little bit easier and opens up more options for recycling and reuse.
Yeah. But I mean, if anything winds up in a landfill, we don't call that storage, but it's going to a place and residing there. So um, that's not a whole lot different from storage. And my whole theme is that if it's recycled, we have to ensure that the recycling doesn't expose it to more of the things we don't want getting into the environment than we started off with. That would not be sensible in my opinion. And I'm not an expert on this, and I'm not an expert on the regulation. But if we are, greatly, fantastically increasing the opportunity for things to get into the environment that we don't want in the environment, I think that would be counterproductive. And on the other hand, if they go to a landfill, I would much rather see them either put in a landfill or above ground, either way, in a way that does not expose them to leaching. So I'm just looking at this from a common sense point of view, um, and no matter what, there's a cost. But I don't have a recommendation.
Somebody gonna
Now
be
about
saddled
cost.
with that cost.
Sorry, what was that?
Somebody gonna be saddled with that cost. Somebody.
Yeah.
I gonna have
Well,
to.
Well, and there's a way to kind of bifurcate that question, which is moving forward for projects that are installed from here moving forward. Um, you could say, well, there's a fee up front, that you pay, and that pays into a fund, and so everybody pays a fair share. And what happens then is that fee is going to have to be added to the incentive that is paid to the installer in order to make that happen, right? It changes the economics. So when the BPU decides how much of an incentive to pay to make solar panels get installed and meet the Energy Master Plan goals, they look at the economics of the project for a targeted rate of return and say, how much incentive does it take to meet that targeted rate of return? If you impose an additional cost, that just means the incentive has to go up by the same amount. And going forward, that's fine. If this is the cost of doing it properly, then it has to be added to the incentive to meet the minimum rate of return. And what happens is it ends up at the end of the line getting paid by ratepayers.
That's right.
Going backwards is more problematic because we didn't have such a system up until now, so that whatever it is, 14 to 15 billion dollars of investment was made with the BPU not accounting for the cost of disposal in their economic analysis. So how we handle that, I think, is going to be the trickiest part. How do you do an ex post facto law retroactively imposing a cost when the incentive system was designed without that? That's probably the most sensitive part of it. Going forward, if there's a fee, everybody pays it, everybody knows it, and it's accounted for in the economics up front, I think that's much easier.
But I think, right, and DEP could probably speak to this, maybe Dan Clark, but on the e-waste side, it's not much different because that program started at a certain point while this material was already within the industry. and I think
Yeah.
it's pretty successful.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and it has been. And the way I think, yeah, I mean, so the e-waste law, I think, was passed in 2010, and really the first program here, I guess, was 2011 or 12, but, there were significant changes with the 2016 amendments that started in the 2017 program year. Which, sorry, I'm pretty sure that's accurate, but also I haven't been here that long, so, I don't go back to 2010 at DEP. Yeah, and I mean, I think that, part of I'm not discounting that idea, because I do think that the e-waste model has worked fairly well in New Jersey, and that a lot of states have similar models. I do think where the issue arises, and something that we've gotten back to a bunch of times, is that, for a covered electronic device, a television in New Jersey, it's a television, a monitor, a computer, or a desktop printer or fax. The lifespan of those, might be 10 years even, but is certainly less than the lifespan of your typical solar panel. So, and the way the e-waste program is implemented is that we get national sales data, and then use that to inform the obligation of each manufacturer for the following year. So, and that's also then based on, is how that we set a target amount of, say, 50 million pounds a year, and based on national sales data, all those manufacturers that are above a 0.01% threshold are assigned an obligation, which is a percentage of that amount. I think, where the difference runs in with solar panels is, I don't know the feasibility of getting that type of data on solar panels. I don't know, I think we're fairly confident that for electronics that national sales data is at least fairly representative of New Jersey, whereas I would guess with solar modules that there might be a little bit more regionality. I don't know. And also too, then, so for any given year, we're dealing with between about 40 and 60 electronics manufacturers, and they've been fairly steady, over the length of the program, where, you have some fall in and some fall out each year that are on the fringe of that 0.01%. But there's not a ton of turnover. Whereas, from everything I've learned from this, I would think that with solar manufacturers, I mean, some of them might just be hard to find, that there might be more turnover. And then also, too, that if the lifespan is, again, that 30, 20 to 30 years, that it would be, you'd have a lot more turnover within that time span, where the people paying for the recycling of the panels would really have no bearing on the people who manufacture them. So, I mean, I guess if we were considering a program along those lines, I mean, I do think that perhaps an advanced recovery fee would make more sense, something more along those lines. Or, again, I think the other issue then, too, is that, we've no way, from what I understand, and I could be wrong, that there's not a great way of sampling those panels that are being disposed to determine who the original manufacturer is. Is that fair to say that, if we went out and pulled every panel coming off a telephone pole or a house, that it would be hard to say who made it, probably?
No, they all have the manufacturer's data and a lot of other data on a nameplate on the back of the module. So that part is very easy. In terms of determining overall, what manufacturer is responsible for how much that's installed in New Jersey, there is the detailed equipment data that the BPU produces, and it's data on every single project that's ever been installed in the state. So it's really excellent, extremely detailed data. Now, to your other point, there is the issue of a lot of solar panel manufacturers going out of business, including some of the biggest ones. and over a long period of time, that's obviously going to get worse. So that
Yeah.
that would be an issue.
This is David from Panasonic.
Thank you.
I hate to say this, but we recently closed a plant in Buffalo, New York, because we weren't making money hand over fist. If we were making money hand over fist, we would probably keep that plant open. But I think I want to say two things, or maybe three. I support the a proposal that Jim Entwistle had put forward with the advanced recovery fee. I do think that it would be wise to consider maybe bifurcating the problem between, households and, I guess, the more commercial or utility scale projects. In those cases, I think, just as we've heard from Chris here, they have the wherewithal, know how to deal with these panels and can manage them properly, or are probably required to do so under law. Whereas it's the householder who really isn't going to have much of an option at the end of life. So my suggestion would be to focus on that person. And then thirdly, I'd like to say that the reason I like the advanced recovery fee is because there's a cost to this, and the farther down the chain of distribution you place that cost burden, the more that cost is going to get marked up as the product moves through distribution. And people will end up paying more than they probably should have because of the markup.
So you're saying it should be an upfront fee on manufacturers? I mean, what are you saying here?
I think on the consumer.
Is that at odds with the incentive?
Might be. We don't have an incentive in the e-waste scenario, right? We compare it to it, but there's no incentive in the e-waste scenario.
So upfront fee on the consumer, you're saying, okay.
And again, I'm trying, in my view, the utility and commercial scale projects should be separated out. They should deal with them themselves, just like businesses deal with their own e-waste, for example.
So what impact would this have on future homeowners, households who may be thinking about solar panels?
I suspect
Yeah,
the extent the price goes up, the less attractive they're going to be.
Yeah, but I mean, the state has goals that need to be met. They're in law, like
Correct.
the Clean Energy Act of 2018. They're in the Global Warming Response Act. So, the presumption is the BPU will do what it takes to meet the goals for every year. So it just means if there's an additional cost, they have to raise the incentive by an identical amount. So I think the homeowner will be made whole going forward, and it's still going to happen within limitations, because the Solar Act the Clean Energy Act of 2018 also imposed an overall statewide cap. So it may end up being that they just can't meet their goals, and the goals of renewable energy have to be revised downward. That would be, not a great outcome from the point of view of fighting global warming and all of that. But assuming you could remain under that cost cap, that statewide cost cap, it would mean just the cost is added to the incentive and ends up being borne by ratepayers, which is another reason to try to minimize that cost. It's far more problematic when you go retroactive to projects that are already in the ground that would not have the benefit of being able to increase the incentive. I think there would have to be a way to support that cohort, and that's all the way from about 130,000 homeowners currently to all of the larger systems that have been installed.
Well, it becomes something like, to follow on your point, Lyle, about the ratepayers, it becomes something like if there's an added regulatory burden to the user, he should be given an opportunity to amortize that extra burden. And maybe the BPU, being the regulator, has the ability to increase rates for purchases. What? There might be an economic mechanism to offset the regulatory burden.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one way or another. Yeah.
I do think something that what Dan was saying earlier, you are going to find, I think, that solar panels are much more of a regional sale. I mean, almost all of ours are sold in California and Hawaii, for example.
Okay. Dave, will you have any recommendation to submit to the commission?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right. Does anybody else have any comments? Anything you would like to discuss? No. I have a couple of quick items. Just with regards to this issue that Chris, you keep talking about, that the managing the solar panels, the end of solar panels that has this waste. I mean, I thought somewhere or in one of the meetings I heard that we could rely on the manufacturer's certification based on serial number, or that's one of the things I think one of our guest speakers mentioned. What was that? Eco environmental, or what was that? Aisha, what were the names of those two companies that they spoke?
Cascade, Eco Minerals, and
Eco environmental. Yeah, I have
Cascade and Eco Environmental.
Eco
Something like
environment.
that. A division of the new big glass.
Yeah, Nick, based on the manufacturers we utilize, they do not have any information relative to characterization of the panels as waste. So that's one of the problems, I think, from an industry, is that the manufacturers are not providing you with clear results of the waste determination. So it's up to the generator in most cases to make that determination.
Should we make that a requirement?
I mean, I don't.
Manufacturers?
Yes, it should.
I mean, you could. I'm not sure how you would accomplish that from a state standpoint, right? Because most of them are not obviously within New Jersey, and most of them are not within the U.S. as a manufacturing. So
Right.
It would be great if you could, but I just don't know how you accomplish that.
I would agree with that.
Maybe the commission can send a note to Bob Smith on the Senate Environmental Committee regarding solar panel recycling, because he was always an advocate for electronics, and maybe he can guide us, or somebody can guide us along how to get this as universal waste.
Who's that? Bob Smith, you said?
Yeah.
Bob Smith, Senator Bob Smith.
Yeah, Senator Smith, I'm not sure, and I apologize, he may be the sponsor of the legislation we're working off of.
I believe he is, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, so he would certainly want to be involved in the outcome. I have a question to see if someone can help educate me. If it is classified as universal waste, does that does that guide in the direction of one method of disposal or recycling or another at all?
Not necessarily, I don't think. I think Jim probably would be better qualified to answer that as a Class D owner operator.
Yeah, as far as I know, the answer is no. It does not push you to recycle in any way. It just classifies the waste that gives you the ability to handle it differently.
Mm-hmm. So for instance, if it's classified as universal waste, is it likely that it could end up in a lined landfill?
Yeah, some components would probably.
Yeah,
My
from a
understanding of
I
universal
don't
waste
believe
is that unless you send it to a permitted recycler,
Downstream.
you must treat it as hazardous waste. So no, you shouldn't be sending it to a landfill, an unlined landfill.
That's my
Right,
understanding as well.
Two people were talking at once there. I think one got drowned out.
Okay, let Jim speak first. Jim, go ahead, please. Sorry.
Yeah, as far as the requirements of how you handle that universal waste and how you recycle it, it's just universal waste is a classification. So just think of it as, okay, now classify this in this basket. How you handle the recycling of that item in that basket is what the regulations do. So on electronics, we got classified as universal waste. So it gave us the flexibility to move the product around and handle the product. And then the law came into place where we had to recycle, the items. So it dropped into, the law from that point. It's a step, it's one of the steps on the journey.
But Lyle, this is David. My understanding is, like Jim said, it's a classification. It's designed to make ubiquitous products easier to manage and to recycle. But if you don't send a designated universal waste to a permitted recycler, then you need to treat it as a hazardous waste.
That is correct, yes.
Because it is, universal waste is a subset of the hazardous waste regulations. So it shouldn't be an open door to landfill. It wouldn't be. I would suspect that would make the DEP very upset.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thanks. That's extremely frightening to someone from the solar industry, because if there aren't viable recycling options, and the alternative is to handle as a hazardous waste, sounds incredibly expensive either way.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, to me, that says that going forward, we'll need something to determine how that cost would be handled on a going forward basis, and something else to determine how it's handled if it's retroactive, which I'm assuming it would be. Well, I shouldn't assume that, I guess.
Okay. Asia, would you like to set up the next meeting now, or?
Yes, I have it ready. February 21st, 12 to 2:30, or 2 to 3:30.
Would that work with everybody, or?
What was the time again?
Wait. February 21st, we're not in. That's President's Day.
Is it?
Yeah. Sorry. I'm pretty
I
sure,
thought it was
right?
February. No, I thought it was February 15th is President's Day.
I thought it was the 21st.
21st.
21st? Okay.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, 21st
I could pull up
is
the
President's
payroll
21st?
calendar.
Okay. All right, it's 21st. Okay.
February 28th.
And the time?
Yeah, 21st is a state holiday.
3:30.
Oh, you're right. You're right. 21st. I'm sorry. 21st.
Ashia, did you say 3:30?
2 to 3:30. My name is the long A sound. Asia.
Oh, I'm sorry. All this time I've been pronouncing your name wrong. Asia. Thank you. I'll do it again. So that's like 3:30 to
28.
3:30 to.
2 to 3:30.
On the 28th.
If it's all good, I'll go ahead and send it.
Would that give everybody enough time to come up with your recommendations, and maybe we can discuss some of them in the next meeting?
Yep,
Yep.
Okay.
it's enough time.
Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Take care,
Thank you
everybody.
all.
All right, you
Have a
too.
good
Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.